building a healthy multi-site leadership culture. Today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, A.J. Mathieu.
Right.
AJ, in 300 and some odd episodes, we've never talked about Multisite, which is crazy. Or at least not that I can recall. If we have, it's been a long time.
Yeah, maybe some caveat here or there. I don't think we've ever had a full episode on it.
And we got several questions when we asked a few weeks ago if anybody had questions for us. We got a handful of Multisite questions. So we're trying to address a few of those questions. I'm not going to read them off because we kind of blended a few things together, but we hope that this is helpful as you're thinking about, if maybe you're thinking about going multi-site, or maybe you are a campus pastor or you lead a church that has campuses. We hope that this is a helpful thing, because I'm going to be honest with you, this doesn't always work very well. Sometimes there's some pretty unhealthy dynamics. And so before we get too far into it, though, I want to give a shout out to healthychurchestoolkit.com. Those handsome gentlemen who are behind the Healthy Churches Toolkit. Go to Healthy Church. That's us, by the way. Go to healthychurchestoolkit.com, sign up for a 7-day free trial, and enjoy all the fun stuff, because a healthy campus, healthy churches, that's what we're after. AJ, before we dive fully into our key points, so we wanted to give a couple of caveats. I'm going to say one, and then I want you to say another. The first caveat that I want to give is the key to a healthy multi-site church in general is going to be knowing what your multi-site strategy is in the first place. So that's not the focus of this particular episode. We could do a whole nother episode on types of multi-site strategies, and maybe we will. But there are different types of multi-site. There's multi-sites that are for church growth. We want our church to grow, and so we're using multiple campuses as a means of doing that. And then even within that category, there's differences. Live teaching, live local teaching versus the teaching is piped in, etc. There's another version of multi-site where you're adopting dying churches. And even within that, there's categories. There's churches that are they're adopting them and they're going to become permanent campuses. You're adopting them and then you're going to spin them off. And then there's a strategy where you are going to be planting campuses, and they're going to be spun off as autonomous churches later. So having a clear strategy up front before you dive into before you dive into being a multi-site church is important. And then our key points for today will become more relevant. But if you've not landed on a strategy, you're starting off on the wrong foot.
Yeah, you're definitely going to be behind and dealing with conflict. But yeah, we'll get into these things here in a minute. The other thing is, you've got to be a healthy church before you try to reproduce anything else. So, and I don't just brush this off either, because I think if this discussion has come up, if you've reached a point where you're like, maybe we could be a multi-site, we could launch a campus, I think you would maybe too quickly go, this is not even a question. I mean, look, we're running 3 services, we're full, and it's easy to think full church equals healthy church, and that's not always the case. We did an episode on this, I think back maybe in May, on why unhealthy churches sometimes grow. And so I would say, be very open to an introspective look and make sure that you're ready. Because partly one of the things that can happen is you've been this entity, this church for a while. The people there get it. They know your culture. They know how you communicate. But to take that and move that into an external space, you're going to have to over communicate. You're going to have to make sure that everything is very clear and organized and understandable. And sometimes that campus can end up revealing things that should have been perhaps different to start with. So be healthy, totally. Ask for help. Yep. Would love to help you do that.
Yeah, totally. Okay. But we want to focus on, all right, let's assume that you've dealt with all of those things. You have a strategy, you got a healthy culture within your church, and now you're going multi-site. So how can we have a healthy multi-site leadership culture among the campus pastors and the staff at the main campus? We'll call it main campus for ease, although that language itself might not be helpful. Original campus, OG, I don't know what you want to call it, but having a good relationship there and a good culture there, that's the focus. So let's dive into point number one. The first one would be this. I think it's really important to just divide up the teams, have really clear teams, staff teams. For example, making a distinction between, say, an executive team and like versus just general staff team. So you might have things like executive team, central services, which serve all of the campuses equally, and then campus specific teams. I think a mistake that often happens with these churches is that it all kind of molds together. Hey, we're all one staff, but the reality is you're not, because everybody's dealing with different things. And what can happen is all of those meetings start to get dominated by that main campus, and those other campuses start to feel like, what are we even doing? Or if there's not an executive team that includes people from the other campuses, then it can feel like, well, we're just going along with whatever they say and they have no voice. So just defining what those teams are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would call this the us and them syndrome. You really have to be careful and monitor this, because if you say we're only an us, but your actions come down at the more granular level of decision making turns out to be an us and them, then this is where I think you can end up with some conflict, misunderstanding. So we just have to be really clear about that. How us are we? Because if we're going for full us, that requires seats at the table and voices being heard. And there has to be a common understanding of how we make decisions. But I'm not saying you can't be a healthy us and them, but it still has to be clearly defined. People have to know, where their place is and what they're going to be a part of and what they're not going to be a part of. So these are decisions that have to be made ahead of time to the extent that you can. It's hard sometimes to consider every possible scenario, but I think you should have a pretty solid framework at this point for executive decision making, levels of autonomy, that kind of thing.
I think that maybe one of the challenges is not every church that's going multi-site these days is a church where, hey, the original campus has 30 staff, and then all of the other campuses have 5 staff or each. It may be that the original campus only has 3 staff, and then they're planting campuses that each only have 1 campus pastor. And so you may wrongly think that adding these different types of teams or defining these separate types of teams is creating a degree of complexity that is beyond what's necessary for where you are. But because you have added a multi-site strategy or moved that in direction, you already are complex. And so you need to define these different types of teams or sub-teams, even if you don't have, across all your campuses, 50 staff. Even if it's just 6 or 7, you need to subdivide and go, here's this executive team that's making decisions at the sort of visionary level, strategic level, versus these teams are making tactical decisions and so on.
Yeah, you're right. There's so much nuance to this because there's so many, it's like infinite scenarios, but I think kind of what you're speaking to, depending on the size of the church, the original campus before beginning its first or multi-campuses, can affect what this relationship is going to look like, because the varying levels of complexity that already exist in the environment. So yeah, this is tough stuff. And so I get maybe the point that we're driving at, that we started off even saying, and that we're continue to drive home here, is do not enter into this lightly.
Have a plan.
The time to really think through this.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Sorry. So number 2 here, clarify the purpose of each meeting. This is tied to number one, but I kind of hinted at this already. If you've got a situation where we just have staff meeting. Every week there's staff meeting, and all the staff from all the campuses come, and let's say collectively across 3 campuses, that's, I don't know, let's call it 10 staff across 3 campuses. And then there's the main campus, and the main campus alone has 15 staff, hypothetically. Well, what do you think is going to dominate that conversation? 1, that's way too many people in a meeting. And 2, of course, the discussion about what's going on in the main campus is going to dominate because they are the majority of the room. And so how does that make those at best you could say it makes the campus staff teams feel marginalized and like it's a waste of their time.
Mm-hmm.
At worst, they feel like, well, what's going on in our campuses doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what's happening at this main campus. So don't do that. Don't have those kinds of staff meetings. Or if you do, if you're going to have an all staff meeting, then give it a clear purpose. It's for camaraderie. It's for vision casting across campuses. But you shouldn't get into the details of what's happening at each campus because that wouldn't be appropriate in a meeting of that size. So figure out, okay, this is an executive team meeting. So this is the kind of thing that happens there. This is a campus-specific staff meeting. We're going to deal with our specific campus issues. This is a cross-functional meeting because maybe you have some things that are in central services, like here's our marketing plan and how we're going to be collaborating across all campuses. You need to have granular and strategic thinking about how you're leveraging meetings so that you don't waste people's time and you don't make people feel like they're stupid or insignificant. And again, we're way too quick to plan a meeting, and not be thoughtful about what its point is.
Yeah, right. This naturally, introduces some geographic limitations as well. Are our campuses 20 minutes away? Is it an hour? Are they in another state? So, what is even the ability to meet in person versus online meetings? We all know online meetings have a different vibe to them. And the way people are able to interact, especially large people, some online, some not, is a huge change in dynamic from everybody being in one place.
Was that a fat shaming thing? You said large people? Sorry.
AJ's a nice person.
I should probably cut that out later.
I don't know what I said, but I did mean large group, physically large people.
Yeah, large groups of people. Like, yeah, have you ever met a large person on the internet? On Zoom? You know what that's like. Sorry,
to increase the resolution on that guy's camera.
I'm laughing because if you ever meet AJ and I in person, it's like Laurel and Hardy.
That's probably a little too far, but maybe there's a hint of that going on.
Totally, there's a hint of that. One time, side story. One time, AJ and I were at a conference we were in Turkey for a ministry conference, and one of the pastors, he served at a church in like Norway or someplace like that, but was he from Tonga or from
Fiji?
He was from Fiji. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up to me and he goes, "You play rugby?" And I was like, "Nah." And he goes, "You look like you could," which I thought was just a sideways. You're a big guy.
He didn't ask me if I played rugby, that's for sure.
I'm sorry, that's a distraction. What your point, though, is a good one, that if you've ever tried to have a meeting on Zoom with a lot of people, it's a nightmare because 3 people dominate the whole meeting. Or if there's several people in the room, I mean, forget it. You can't hear anybody. It's awful.
Yeah. All right, number 3, Scott.
Okay. Empower campus autonomy. So this goes back to strategy. You need to clearly define up front, what decision-making capability does each campus have? So this is maybe a crass example, because I'm not suggesting that churches are fast food restaurants or that multi-site campuses are franchises. But it is a helpful analog to think, all right, an individual McDonald's does actually have some degree of autonomy. They have some control over pricing strategy. They have some control over limited time menu offerings they will or won't have. So there are some things that they can decide. They can hire and fire their own staff. There are all kinds of things that they can do on their own. They don't have to get anybody else's approval to do it. They can just operate. There are other things, though, that they don't get to decide. Whether or not they're going to offer Happy Meals is not up to them. What the Happy Meal toy isn't up to them. Like, there are things that get just decided for them, and it's their responsibility to comport. Now, what is there is a wide range that you can have on the spec. There's a huge spectrum of autonomy, to very tightly controlled to very highly autonomous. And none of them are right or wrong. That's what I want to just clarify and say. There isn't one right strategy for that. The right strategy is the one that you communicate clearly and enforce. So if it's tightly controlled, people should know what that is, what the boundary lines are, and know what they are up front. So if you come on out as a campus pastor in a church and you know it's a tightly controlled environment, don't start complaining that it's tightly controlled. You knew what the situation was when you applied for the role and were hired into it. You can't get mad as the McDonald's operator that, we really ought to have sad meals here, not Happy Meals. You don't get to choose that. So be sure you're clear, but my experience has been very often these boundary lines aren't clear and people don't know how much autonomy do we have. And that's where the friction comes. And the lack of trust and the frustration, not just felt, by the way, by the leadership, but it can be felt down at the congregational level too. When those boundary lines aren't clear, people are like, what is going on? I thought we could do this. And so
that is true. Yeah. You can end up, people could be like, oh, I thought this would be simple for us to do. And, your campus pastor or somebody's like, no, it's not a decision I can make, or this is going to have to go through some channels for us to decide whether we want to do that or not. And then the people in the church are like, what? Why? Something that, if you don't understand the structure, you think, well, this ought to be easy. And
this ought to be simple.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you learn that's just not how this works.
Yeah. So it's so important that you clarify what those boundary lines are, enforce them, and then on the other side of that is then trust. So if you say you have autonomy within these boundaries, don't be sabotaging them every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Let them have that autonomy. If they make a mistake, deal with the mistake, but don't micromanage campus pastors within the boundary lines you've set for them. That's not going to create that's going to create division. If you say, hey, you can do X thing, and then later on you go, oh, you hamper them in some way from doing that. Now you violated that trust, and now you've created, now I don't want to share with you. Now I've created this division. So set the clear expectations clearly up front, enforce those boundaries, and then give freedom within the boundaries. And then if there's a mistake, you can deal with the mistake. That's okay. People make mistakes. That's how they grow. So that's all right. But don't hound them.
Yeah.
In the interim.
Yeah. Our next point is sort of related. It's a little more nuanced to some of these other things that we've kind of already talked about, and that's establish consistent communication rhythms. So similarly to meetings, physical meetings that we might be having, we also just need to think about our communication channels as well. And even, getting down to that campus level, who is going to communicate things to the congregation? Campus pastor, campus staff person, or does everything come from, a main campus? Or what types of things? Who will communicate what types of things? This starts to get really granular, and you probably aren't going to solve every possibility, with this on the front end, but at least have some general guidelines already in place before you launch a campus, and then begin to make decisions on these in conjunction with leaders, all the stakeholders as you begin to go forward. And again, a lot of this, comes back to levels of trust, and predefined levels of autonomy versus, consistency, as you define the relationship between a main or a planting campus, launching campus, and subsequent multi-site other campuses.
I got nothing to add to that. I think that's important. They just, the key thing here is just to avoid redundancy. How can we just streamline things? The last thing, though, our last point here is to foster cross-campus leadership unity through shared wins. Bit of a word salad there, but essentially, maybe a pet peeve of some people would be when you hear the one church, 5 campuses or whatever. Maybe let's go back to McDonald's for a minute. McDonald's is one brand, but it's not one restaurant. It's thousands of restaurants that share some sense of identity. And the natural reality, I know we like to say, we're one church in 3 locations. It's not true. No matter what your multi-site strategy is, because it's in the nature of human beings that we develop culture. When a particular group of people come together, it develops a distinct culture. It's just the reality. And so maybe moving away from some of that language would be helpful. You can have shared DNA, you can have shared identity, you can have shared goals, you can have shared giving, and you can have, there are all resources. You can have all kinds of things that are shared, but your identity is going to be a little bit different from place to place. And rather than trying to pretend that that's not the case, maybe lean into the fact that it is different. And where you can build some unity, though, is through recognizing that when one campus wins, it's a win for the kingdom and it's a win for all of us, and not minimizing the smallest of the campuses or whatever, but really celebrating how every campus is winning in a particular way. And that starts to develop trust. I know, maybe moving away from McDonald's and moving to Chick-fil-A, I know for a fact that the Chick-fil-A owner operators, I'm acquaintances with a couple of them. The community among the owner operators is really intense, in a positive way. Like they spend a lot of time together. The ones that are in the same regions will meet together, and nationally they come together on a fairly regular basis, and they celebrate one another and how they're all winning, but they're all different. All of those Chick-fil-A's have a little bit of a different culture. And I think, again, I'm not trying to say your multi-site churches are restaurants, but I am trying to just communicate that you really want to be sure that you're regularly celebrating wins from all the campuses, and not trying to say you're one church, because you're not. You're different campuses, and with different people and different challenges and different cultures. And there are things that you share and there are things that you don't, but we can all win together. And the biggest problem with multi-site churches is this feeling that only one of the campuses matters and it's the main one. That does not have to be the case. It doesn't have to be that way, but it often is.
Yeah. I mean, slightly off, but still in the vein of this episode, Scott. I mean, considering even Chick-fil-A versus McDonald's and using the word culture, I think everybody's been to both. If you have these restaurants in your region, and Chick-fil-A is known for speed of the drive-through, saying my pleasure, whenever they help somebody. And you find that across every single Chick-fil-A, you know, because
they're generally really involved in the community.
It is a culture. It was a predetermined culture that they've worked very hard to continue through the owner operators who convey it to the staff at the restaurants. McDonald's, obviously, I have no idea how McDonald's runs their company, but from the user experience, you can determine, and I bet you would all agree with me, McDonald's does not talk about culture down to the staff level at a restaurant, because everybody knows the experience. One McDonald's might be awesome one day, terrible another day. One store might be consistently pretty good. One store is consistently really bad. So, I mean, we use the word culture in the title of this episode.
The food tastes the same for the most part.
They're producing the same product. The experience of getting that product, or if it's even available that day, ice cream. You just never know.
Yeah, that's right. And you're right. And it's, I mean, it's not like you couldn't have a bad Chick-fil-A experience. I guess you could. But you're right. The culture is consistent.
In theoretical space, there could be a bad Chick-fil-A experience.
But they do care about culture, and it's obvious that they do. And so, but Chick-fil-A would never say, we are one restaurant in hundreds of locations. That's not language they would use, because it's not true. They are hundreds of restaurants that have a shared culture.
Yeah.
And so moving away from this, I mean, this wasn't in our notes, but maybe it's a pet peeve. Because you intrinsically know it's not true. It's not possible to be one church in 3 locations. You can be three congregations with the same name and a shared vision and a shared culture and shared processes and shared resources, but you're not one congregation.
Yeah.
You're not.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how Chick-fil-A, what kind of language they use for their franchises, but I would almost venture to say it would more likely be, if they were going to use some kind of phrase, we are one culture in 1,000 locations. Because that, I think the user experience would say that is probably close to true.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting.
So just something to think about. I'm not trying to condemn any multi-site church, but if you started with like, hey, we're moving to multi-site, we're going to be one church in 3 locations, just stop saying that. No one believes it.
Yeah. You're going to run up into barriers and challenges to maintain that motto. Yep.
Yeah, because it's never true. That's never the truth.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. If your church, hey, you know what? Let's celebrate the fact that if your church is growing and Lord willing, you're healthy and continuing that, and this has become a conversation, man, that is something to be celebrated. What are we going to do with our growth? So I hope that's how you're feeling. Or you know what? Even you're a church of 200 and your sanctuary is full. And you're like, what are we going to do next? Man, this is awesome. I love that might be where you're at. So take the time to discern God's will for your church, the right strategy, and I hope that you do have a healthy culture, healthy systems, and leadership development. So that'd be awesome. We would love that for you. We'd love to help you. If you have questions about that, reach out to us. We could talk about this. Yeah, hey, the show notes for this week down there in the YouTube description or on your podcast app. You can read this week's article and any other resources that we have available for you this week. We're glad you were here. We'll see you again next time on the Church Revitalization Podcast, not franchised, but continuing week to week.
That's right. See you next time.